All right. Welcome again, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kristen Bands. I'm the manager of network engagement for the Teen Science Cafe Network. And today's webinar is how teen science cafes weathered and rebuilt after the pandemic. And it is presented by Jessica Sickler and Angie Ong of J. Sickler Consulting. Jessica and Angie are part of the firm J. Sickler Consulting, which is our research team for Teen Science Cafe Network on the NSF grant, Creating a Teen Science Cafe Movement. I want to share a little bit about them before I hand it over to them to do the presentation. So Jessica is an experienced researcher, evaluator, educator, and consultant. She has spent the last 15 years helping organizations and programs understand, embrace, and implement evaluation and audience research in their quest for improvement and community impact. She's also the principal for J. Sickler Consulting. And Angie has served many roles in the audience research field, from practitioner, advocate, and teacher. She comes to J. Sickler Consulting after 10 years of teaching at the University of Washington's Museology graduate program, where she led efforts in developing university museum partnerships that built evaluation capacity in Seattle's museum community. Jessica and Angie, feel free to take it away whenever you would like to.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kristen. Always weird hearing yourself introduced like that, but yeah, hi, I am Jessica. Angie, oh, there's Angie. She's having some audio issues, so are you up and running? All right, awesome, perfect. So we're super excited to be here. We've been working with the Teen Science Cafe program for a whole bunch of years, and then in particular over this last year, or the last few years, we've been working on this NSF grant, and we're sort of constantly taking a temperature of the network. And so every year or so, we like to pop on and give sort of an update on the state of the network and help all the members know sort of where things stand, because you are each running your sort of isolated programs, and sometimes it's helpful to see how you're fitting into a much bigger picture. And yeah, this year a lot of our looking was really digging into the post-pandemic recovery, and it's been a rough few years for everyone. And so we were taking a look back and a look forward at sort of where we've been and where we've come. And so we're going to share some data with you all about what we found. And really, we hope we get to talk a lot at the end about whatever is on your minds. So Kristen, I am going to share screen. I don't know if it'll let me take over. Did that work? Yes? No?
No, I'm going to stop sharing my screen once.
Okay. Oh, now I'm screen sharing.
There we go.
Yeah? All right, awesome.
It is not working.
Okay, let me stop and try again.
Did whoever put up this big first slide unshare their screen? Or
Yeah,
is that
I just unshared, yes.
It's already, I'm unsharing again, so just 1 second.
We'll try again.
There we go.
All right, faces. Now let's see if we can make the magic happen. Yeah? Yeah, all right, I see Angie nodding, so okay, cool. All right, so this is our annual State of the Network conference. So it just makes me feel important, like, you know, I'm giving a State of the Union. And so what are we, let's see if my mouse can work. So what were we doing here? What were we hoping to learn in particular this year? Any of you who are members of the network know that every spring you get a request to, you know, fill out the annual survey reporting on what you've been doing, what you're up to, what you've been struggling with, where you've been successful. And some of that data is what we're reporting out today. And this year we really wanted to understand how sites are doing in the wake of COVID-19. It was a rough few years, like we said, and we wanted to sort of see where things were and actually look back and see where things have gone. And perhaps more importantly, find out what can the network, what can Kristen and Katie and the whole team do to help you even more in keeping this rebuilding and this momentum going. So this is some of the stuff we're going to talk about. We we did two things. So I already mentioned number two here, where we asked you about your programs, which we do every year. And so we updated that and that was just such rich information. If you are one of the folks who responded to that this year or any year, thank you. It is so valuable. I hope you're going to see that. The other thing we did was we consolidated a lot of old data that was scattered in a lot of different places about all the different institutions that have been part of the Teen Science Cafe network over the years, to try and paint a better picture of how the network has sort of ebbed and flowed over these recent years, to really understand that impact. And now we have a much better database infrastructure, so we're going to be able to track that in a more robust way going forward, which is exciting to a data geek like me and like Angie. Why we ask you this information every year, because I want to encourage you to provide it if you're able to, is it really helps the network understand where we are, know who's running, who's had to pause, whatever state you're in, and to really tell the story of this network and of the work you're doing as a collective group, and talk about that and make sure we are serving you. And for you, we hope some of this information is interesting in terms of seeing what other folks are doing, how many programs, who's virtual, who's in person, all of those kinds of things. And to give you some collective evidence that you can talk about even your individual programs, evidence of what you're doing and why. So let's dig in. This is the snapshot of where we are from all the data you all have provided us over the years, and we're going to dive in. So we're going to start with that look back. We looked back over lots of records that sort of were kept in various ways during the course of the main part of the pandemic, and reconstructed the history of sort of where all the different sites were, what was going on. And this is sort of the picture that came out of that. Is in sort of December 2019, beginning of 2020, the records seem to show there were about 114 active cafes, and then this small cohort that had just started a training program. I think they were mainly rural sites. So this is like where we started. And then of course, 2020 hit. And by the end of 2020, this was the state of the network. Almost no one was completely active. Some were still trying. A lot just sort of dropped off the map, and we sort of didn't even know where they were. And through here, you sort of see that whole progression, right? Of as the waves kind of happened and sites tried to get going again, as we sort of trained new cohorts and tried to get more people involved. This was kind of that picture. It really did shrink the network. I think we have to face facts that, like, we had 114, 121 sites, at that point at the beginning of 2020, and now we're about at the beginning, or mid 23, we were at about 46 sites that were sort of either active or getting regoing. And that was a constraint, or a contraction rather, of the network, which was disappointing, but was a fact of life. And I think it means this is where we are going forward. This is a version of that same picture where we sort of annotated some of the key points, because there's like a lot of information in that graph, I realize. And some of that I talked about is that we lost, like, everybody was diminished. I mean, 2020 was just a nightmare, right, for everybody. And it was impressive that anyone was even trying, but some were, and we really just did drop down. And then you see the sort of waves of attempting to restart, which was really encouraging up until this year. And now everyone's sort of rolling again and doing things again, which is good to see. We also, like I said, this I think is our new baseline. So as we go forward, we're probably not going to look at this map ever again, because that was the past, and here's where we are now. And this is our strong but mighty core that has really persisted and that we want to support the most going forward. And I think for me, one of the things that was really interesting was that this whole big segment down here, while there's like waves of movement, it was kind of like if we lost track of you, or you told us you were pausing at this point, a lot of them didn't come back. Like, this stayed like pretty stable in terms of a group. So like failure in 2020 very often was permanent if you weren't able to keep going, which was disappointing, but a fact of life and really helpful to understand in retrospect. So where we are now we look forward, right? We take that chunk at the top and we keep moving forward. What we learned from surveying all of you this year is that sites are rebounding. You're coming back from those constrained programs and really able to get going again. These were the main folks that we got from the survey, and this is who most of the data is coming from that you're going to see for the rest of this presentation, is those who are active or restarting. And we only had 3 new folks that we sort of found out, at least through the survey process, that had ended. Through other sort of tracking, we'd found out all the other places that had ended. And in the meantime, there's like multiple ways we get all of this information. But I think this is the key part of seeing all these active sites was really encouraging after all this time. And I think now I'm going to toss it to Angie.
Yeah, so building from that, and it's lovely to see all the faces to names that I've had a chance to speak with over the past year or so. But as we look forward, as Jessica described, those active sites, we were really able to get a lot of information from those active restarting sites. And you can see here that this good news just really continues for us. And we see that almost 3/4 of the Science Cafe sites that did respond to the survey here were hosting in-person cafes of either exclusively or in combination with virtual events. And these 23 sites hosted 190 cafe events this year, which is really encouraging to see. And note here that when we look across all the responses, we see that the typical, or we're going to call that our median, because we had outliers on all ends, so we kind of just looked at the median. So when I use the word typical over the next couple of slides, that's kind of what I'm talking about. But we'll see that typically the Science Cafe sites are holding 6 in-person cafes or 2 virtual cafes over the course of this year. So great rebound and continued momentum into this coming year. Next slide. And these events across the whole network has attracted over 4,500 teens this past year. And typically an event would serve 124 teens. So again, as I said, we had a few outliers. I think one event actually had like 550 teens actually participate in this huge event. But just when we're looking at looking at a typical event, we can see that this is really a robust event of having about 100 teens participate in some of these programs that are being hosted. And you can see from the chart below the range of ages we're actually seeing in the teens that were actually participating. And what we're kind of gauging is that it's usually around 13 to 18-year-olds, but you can see that the spread of age ranges across that chart is you see everything from tweens, 9, 10s, and 11-year-olds, all the way to 19 and older young adults. And this is a really wide gap, and I'd be curious to kind of hear from you in some of our discussions what the age ranges you're seeing. Are you seeing a disparate range of age ranges participating in your events, or do they tend to kind of cluster in particular grades or in particular areas? But noting that this is such a wide range of ages that teen science cafes are serving, it's something that we want to consider because, needs, maturity, interests, all sorts of factors are different across all of those age ranges. And it's something as we think about how to continue to engage, how do we get teens to commit, how do we address the kind of get teens involved and committed to this process, knowing that who's actually coming to these events is an important starting point in that. So next slide. What's also really encouraging is that 64% of the Science Cafe sites indicated that their events are actually specifically targeting teen groups that are traditionally underrepresented in STEM. Particularly, 94% are saying that it is they're actually doing programs that really serve low socioeconomic communities. And that's followed by girls and Latino and Black and African teens and teen communities. So we want to recognize that there's a lot of intentionality in some of the programs that you're running and that the work that you are doing and that Teen Science Cafe is doing to uplift these traditionally marginalized or underrepresented groups into STEM. So that's a really encouraging trajectory that we're seeing as well. Next slide. And of course, when we asked you all about, describe a win for us, what were some of the wins you got this year? It was really great to see the excitement that you're all expressing in terms of the awesomeness of your teams, whether it be the leaders that are stepping up and really taking a role into this, and that you're seeing that there are more teams coming to these events, that they're more engaged. That's also encouraging to see, that you're describing the speakers and the topics that you're able to cover at these events are interesting and engaging for your participants, and that some of you also described the partnerships and relationships that you've been able to build in your communities that have really added added a lot to your events and made them a lot more robust and sustainable as well into the future. And of course, some of you who responded were also saying it's just so dang exciting to have a cafe again, to have an in-person cafe particularly, and kind of acknowledging the value and importance of having that in-person connection with the teens, that the teens are seeing each other and engaging with each other and meeting each other, and that enthusiasm that they're bringing to an in-person event is also kind of reason for optimism for many of your programs into being able to continue into the future.
All right, I'm going to jump in here. I will echo what Angie was just saying on that last slide. Of it was so great to see some of these comments. It just was really showing the positive shift from the past. It's been a rough couple of years, and hearing those excitements of like, we actually got all the sites up and running, all the schools having their events was just really awesome. So yay. One of the other things we asked about, and it's a particular curiosity of mine, I don't know, maybe because I'm an evaluator and the word value is like right in there in my name, is how you all describe what value having this program in your organization, how it meshes with your organization's priorities and values, and like what are the most important things. Because sometimes I think we struggle when we're talking to newbies about the Teen Science Cafe model to say like why do it? Why is this a benefit for your organization? Last year, we asked a bunch of open-ended questions about this. And so we got a lot of your words and your descriptions. And from that, we created this list, which was quite lengthy, of sort of different values, that ways this program could value and be valuable to an organization, and how do you select whichever ones resonated for your organization. And what was really interesting for me is there were these three that literally almost every one of our active responding sites said, yes, this is why we do this, were these three things: promoting discovery in STEM, promoting teen leadership and empowerment, and building relationships in their community. So if you need to boil down to someone like, why would you do a Teen Science Cafe? Why would you invest in this in your organization? It's that sort of trifecta coming together. It is not just one of them, but it is all three things of promoting STEM discovery, empowering teens, and connecting with your community that really rise to the top for everyone. Now, there are all these other ones that did, especially a lot of the STEM element is really key, probably not surprising, but is certainly, was quite up there for folks. But I think this was really interesting. What also struck me is that some of the value statements that were more institution-centered, maybe a little selfish, like it helps us reach teen audiences, or, oh yeah, it's low investment, high reward, or raises our profile, didn't resonate as much with our Teen Science Cafe leaders. They're like, no, that's not why we do this. That's not why our organization invests in it. It's more the sort of mission connection, I think, that is really going on there. And that was really helpful for us to understand, because you all are the ones living in your institutions, not us. And so this was really, really helpful. And we're going to be using this, I suspect, in any messaging going forward as we recruit new folks in to be trained and learn how to do this with you. So those were the highs. There are still lows, right? So as Angie shared the success stories, we also asked a bit about challenges that folks have experienced, and they are still there. And sometimes they mirror the places where some cafes are having success. So it is uneven. And I'm going to guess that's your lived experience, where some sites have had success in getting their team leaders back and on board and leading again, and other sites are still struggling with that leadership and commitment and getting teams into that role in this sort of brave new world we've entered at this point. But these were really helpful to see that some of the biggest areas of concern continued to be about that sort of team participation. Getting attendance at events for some folks was still a struggle. I'm remembering from last year and this year of that need to sort of rebuild your audience, because it just sort of got decimated over those 2 years of either not doing cafes or doing them virtually. That there's just a lot of restarting from scratch. And that was another sort of comment that we heard, was that like the restart is still challenging, and we're still rebuilding, and it is a process. We want to celebrate our successes, but we also want to acknowledge that it's been a tough road and it's a climb that you're all engaged in through this process. And then some other things were, that it's the challenges of running a teen science cafe that you're probably familiar with, of their logistics, and depending on where you are, that can create a whole different set of barriers, hurdles that you need to cover in order to get an event online, right? And finding speakers was another thing that a few people said, and certainly we've heard in the past, that depending on where you are and what your connections are in the community, or what your teens are interested in, how you find those speakers who are relevant to interests of theirs, and also that you're vetting so that they are actually, going to be able to engage with teens in a meaningful way. So those were all really helpful to hear about, because these are the kinds of things then the network can provide support for as well, which I think is probably the most important thing, is how can we help you with these barriers? And then, staying on my Debbie Downer ending here, of challenges, we also did sort of give a list of challenges that you might face. And we were really curious, again, in that sort of rebuild process after COVID. We'd been hearing anecdotally people saying, oh, this feels so much harder than it used to. Like it's newly hard in a way it wasn't 3 or 4 years ago. And so we asked about that, and we said, well, like, which of these are actually harder than they were before? And in truth, there wasn't necessarily a lot of consensus around some of those things. That this wasn't especially harder than it was. It's sort of just as hard as it always was. The thing that seems to be the difference, I think, this is sort of the trend we've seen, is that for many, teen participation, teen leadership, teen commitment in various forms has been the thing that has felt differently hard or newly hard post-pandemic. And that seems to be an area that probably as a network, we need to keep thinking together about strategies and what does it look like now, and which old strategies still work and which old strategies maybe we need to rethink for the way our worlds and our schools and our teens are thinking and working now. So I think that was really, really interesting as well. And again, points us in some directions for getting you more support and talking about these issues that we're all experiencing. Let's share them together, because we're all having these experiences. And then we asked, on that point of how can we support you, is, as the professional members of this network, what kind of support would be most helpful to you? What would you get the most out of? What would you like to see us come back to? And so this is one of those diverging graphs. So like, you just imagine a line right down the middle, and the longer the bar is out here to the left, the more people we had saying they were really interested in that kind of experience. And then the things to the right are like, yeah, sure, it'd be helpful, but maybe not really. Maybe I'm just being nice. And so this was really helpful for thinking about which of these were sort of coming out the strongest as things people really wanted to see going forward. And the things that jumped out were the interest in an in-person conference again. It's been a long time since the network's been able to do that, partly because of COVID and other factors, but that opportunity to get together in person, much like our cafe events and exchange ideas and share in that format, seemed to be a thing a lot of people were really interested in. So we took note of that. Connecting regionally or with other kinds of birds of a feather meetups, maybe virtually, for EAs would also seem to be a thing that was a value of meeting people maybe from your region and getting to know those folks who are nearby you. And then the other thing we saw that there was a lot of interest in, which we were really excited about, was the idea of a searchable database of cafe programs where, again, you might not need to feel so isolated that there's a list, it's searchable of different topics and speakers and event ideas that you could use for inspiration as you're planning with your teens or helping your teens see what is possible in a teen science cafe, having your team leaders think about. And so that seemed to be of like really high interest as well. And so is another thing that sort of popped out and that we wanted to think about as a network. And on that note, I am gonna pause my talking and I am gonna hand it over to Kristen to actually talk about how she is thinking about using some of that data, how the whole team is in terms of providing more resources for the network. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah, so it's really exciting to be able to get real-time feedback about what is going to be helpful for folks in the network. It's much better than me sitting in my little room thinking up things that are going to be helpful. Yeah, so just a couple of things that are in the works. We are creating a searchable database of cafes. Caveat on that is that I am basically doing a whole bunch of internet research on the cafes that I can find online and reaching out to people via email. One thing that would be extremely helpful is after you do a cafe, we have a form that I can share with you after this meeting, and you can just basically fill out what your cafe was about, who the speaker was, and any hands-on activities that you did, and that form will be automatically uploaded into our database. So it'll be searchable for folks who are going to want to see what you did in the future. My goal is to get this database in some type of form in the spring to release, and then do an e-newsletter so folks can understand the process of making this form making this a living document that people are constantly adding to and growing. Another thing that we are working on for release in the spring is birds of a feather affinity groups. So I'll be reaching out to folks in various regions and creating Zoom conversations around that and helping to facilitate those. We are also working on getting a listserv up on our website. Our website is in a transitional phase right now, and so we're updating and creating new content for our website. That's an ongoing process for us. We think of it as a living document as well. So we'll be adding a listserv function to that, and I'll probably do an e-news or individual emails to see what types of, and also going back to our evaluation, what types of topics we can populate this listserv with to begin with. We are also working on, we have a members database that we just released as well. Let's see what else. Katie, do you want to pop on and see if I've forgotten anything that's kind of like in the works? I don't think I have. Those are the big things that we have going on. But all of the new releases will happen via personal email from me, e-news, and social media. And we're constantly like coming up with new things as well. And all the feedback that you give from this next year's evaluation will also, or directly to me or Jessica or Katie, will also influence the types of projects that we have going for you. Oh, webinars. I'm sorry, I forgot. Webinars like this one. So we do have webinars in the pipeline. We have webinars specifically around teen participation and social emotional learning post-COVID. Those will be coming up, sponsored by MGM, which is Million Girls Moonshot, and those will be national cafe events. So we have at least 2 of those in the pipeline, maybe more before the end of the year is over with. So those are some of the exciting things on the horizon. More to come.
Awesome. And I've been responding rapid fire in the chat to some questions, but I think some might be good to share as well. So Lauren brought up the cool cafes, which for those of us who've been in the Wayback, can get in the Wayback Machine and have been around, were I think a more like narrative form, and then they'd be featured on the website. Is that right, Kristen? Am I remembering right?
So we have a new Cool Cafe form that I've been emailing directly out to cafes to get their youth involved in creating a review of the cafe experience from their perspective, and those get published on our website. I also do member spotlights on our blog. So I have contacted some of you on this call already, and will probably contact more of you in the future to get member spotlights for you going on. What are some other questions that maybe I could answer really quickly?
Well, I think on that, so I answered you wrong, Lauren, in my chat message. So I hope people watching are just watching and listening and not reading. And so it sounds like there's a couple different ways of like sharing cafe ideas. So the Cool Cafe has not gone away. I was wrong.
Yeah.
The database is I think my take on it is it's a little bit simpler than a Cool Cafe. It's not quite as labor intensive for you or the teens. So that still has value. But this is a way you can like fill out a form that's like the highlights, topic, which disciplines, who is our scientist, and then it's all organized in a database, a spreadsheet effectively, but that's online. So people can search through it and go, oh, we really want to do something on brain engineering, but I don't know anything about brain engineering. I don't know, I'm making up a thing that doesn't exist, and then find it and sort of go, oh, well, that cafe in Iowa did that, and maybe call them up and talk to them about it, or just steal their ideas, whatever.
Yeah. It's been harder to get cafes to provide their activities that they've done with the particular program. So I'm looking to try to find ways to mine information on that. We're also starting a Pinterest page of cafe ideas. This is just kind of like really low-hanging fruit. What are some hands-on activities that you folks could incorporate into your cafes if you're completely lost and not really sure where to start? So that'll be another resource that will be populating, that I've started to populate, and that I'll release in the spring too. So there's another quick search idea for you as well.
And oh, sorry, Katie.
I was just going to say one fun thing that everyone can participate in is a photo contest. We have that going on this fall. So some of these things are sort of light. And if you have some fun pictures to send on to us, then we can share what you're doing, with pictures to the whole network.
Yeah. And those pictures are amazing. So yay, yay. Is there a prize for the contest, or just like that you get to be the best?
There's a prize. We have 3 different categories for the contest, and there is one prize for each category, and the prize will definitely benefit your cafes.
Oh, I love prizes. I don't have a cafe, so you all have to win for me and then tell me about the cool prizes. Cool. Will had a question about that post-cafe survey, which is what feeds into the event database. Who should be filling that out? I'm going to go out and say, I think the adult leader should fill it out, because it'll be faster for you, and then have the team do the cool cafe, right, to really spotlight what they did more qualitatively and in a more marketing kind of way. And then you can just fill out, because it should be pretty quick to fill out, right? One thing I don't think we're there this year, but one thought we had in that is, if you're reporting those numbers of like, oh, it could be a way to report that data about participation in the moment, rather than having to like save it all up and report it at the end of your survey. Because one thing we found, we didn't necessarily emphasize it in this version of this presentation, but is those numbers that Angie was talking about attendance, those are a lot of estimates that we do ask you, like, are those real numbers or are those estimates? And a lot of times we get, yeah, those are estimates, because we can't keep track. If you're doing it one at a time, it might be a little easier to keep track and be like, oh, okay, we had 22 kids at this event, check, that's on the list. And so we might be able to make it easier on you at the end of the year that way.
Yeah, the form is it's very similar to a Google form, and it'll take you less than 5 minutes to fill out. It's very low maintenance.
And then I'm seeing what other questions we missed in here. Oh, I know. At the very top, Jill asked if she could get a copy of some of those graphs that we were showing to help you. And absolutely, I think, Angie, you and I were just talking about this yesterday. We're going to create a, there was like this really monstrous NSF year-end report that we have to do. It's monstrous. We're going to get you the section of the stuff that matters to you, and we'll just pull that out that basically covers all the data we talked about today, maybe just a tiny bit more. And we'll share it with Kristen, she'll share it with you or post it online and you can have access to it. And then it has a little more context along with those graphs as well. And feel free to use them. And also feel free to reach out to me and Angie at any time if you have a question about something or it didn't make sense. That's great.
And to that point, I want to shout out to Amy for noticing something that both Jessica and I and everybody else who's looked at this report kind of went, you know, when the monstrous report, you start glazing over after a while. This is what happens when you're just looking at so many numbers. They are stopping, there's no computing anymore. But Amy made a note about slide 11 with regards to the teens and a typical event. And a typical event would serve 124 teens, I think is what was on the slide. And she's like, wow, that's really encouraging. It's super high. Is that right? I'm like, oh no, that was a typo. So I wanted to just raise that and just say on me that it is actually meant to say that the typical sites are serving 124 teens, and that it on average, or actually we're looking at the median of that, it's about 22 teens an event. So just wanted to calibrate that for everybody and make everybody feel better about their programs, not serving 124 kids. So that's on me. That's my bad as we look at that. But thank you, Amy, for raising that. I really appreciate all of it. Everybody kind of keeping the eyeballs on all of that.
Absolutely. Yes, I had that moment too. As I'm sitting, I'm like, wow, that seems really high, but
everybody was having a heart attack
all week when we looked at this 1,000 times. But hey, things.
Yeah.
Eagle eyes, so, you get bonus
exactly.
points.
Exactly. 124 teens are served per site and about 22 per event.
Okay. Thanks. Because I just took my orientation like 2 days ago and I'm like, whoa, how does big cities do that?
I mean, I think there are some, and like we said, there were some outliers in there that made us go, I don't know, I'm going to date myself here, but things that make you go, which is like that 550 kind of outlier number. And so sometimes there's some more investigation that needs to happen. And I think maybe it was an online, I think there's like one site that does like really big online events or something. Anyway, we need to look into it. They're kind of outlier-ish. That is much more normal of like 20, 10, like it should not be giant. Because actually we've heard, I feel like we had some conversations of if you have a really giant cafe event, some of the things that make cafe special become harder to do. If you've got an auditorium, effectively, you're gonna have to have an auditorium if you have 100 kiddos. You can't, it just makes it a lot more challenging to do some of the hands-on and really engaging kind of stuff. So bigger is not necessarily better. I think that's also an important message there. The collective impact will hit thousands of kids just by all of you having 10 kids a month coming to your cafe. That's pretty awesome. So. $55, Lauren, you had 55 this weekend. That's amazing. Holy cow. Let's
I had
yeah, go ahead, Will.
a bit of a kind of like nuanced question. Wolfroy Moorhead Planetarium, Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We just had a cafe on Friday. We had 54, which was great. But I'm kind of curious, you know, Moorhead Planetarium, we're part of a university, and I'm kind of curious, like in the kind of like feedback that you've gotten from surveys, like how many of the active science cafes are associated with like another organization, like a university or school or something?
Yeah, that is a great question. Most are pretty much associated with some kind of organization. I don't know that there are any like just some rogue adult out there just making the world a better place all on their lonesome, although maybe. But the types of organizations, to your point, are very different. And we could pull that up. We have the survey data, but actually what's more accurate is the database data that Kristen has been keeping up to date, because we can sort of do that breakdown of university. Off the top of my head, I don't know, if I poked around for 5 minutes, I could probably find it for you. But I think we're largely museums, zoos, aquariums are one big chunk, because that's like where a lot of them started. And then universities is another segment. Lately, a lot of our new folks who Katie and Claudia and other Katie have been training are after school programs. That's sort of one of our new big areas of growth. So organizations, after school programs that serve that sort of post school time, boys and girls clubs, things like that. So that's sort of a new area of growth for the network, actually, because we sort of started in these university and museum and library type spaces. So that's been an interesting area of growth, and is actually, I don't know if you were a plant, Will, but an area of focus for this year in our research is sort of digging into what are some of the special needs, challenges, and affordances for different types of institutions? Because I'm guessing affiliated with a university and a planetarium, you've got both of those resources. Some things like maybe finding scientists is probably a wee bit easier for you, whereas maybe finding kiddos is a little bit harder or something, right? That different organizations have different challenges. So we're curious.
We have 7 active folks who are running out of universities, and that's another thing with Birds of a Feather. It's not just regional. And based on what Jessica was saying, we did ask those specific questions around organizational type and successes and kind of like pain points. And so that's another kind of thing that we're going to be arranging Birds of a Feather around too.
Then a more tactical question that Louisa asked in the chat, and it got a little buried, but I don't want to lose it, was that post cafe event info form. Can folks get to it now? Where would they find it? Or is it not quite ready for prime time yet?
So I can share it with everyone afterwards. I want to change a couple of things on the form before I share it publicly. I was planning on sharing it publicly in the spring, but I can make those changes quickly and share those with you within today's Wednesday, by Monday at the latest.
That is responsive. Yeah, that'd be awesome. If you're ready to jump in and if you want to be our beta testers, isn't that what they say in the tech world of help us make sure, alpha testers, maybe make sure it works and before it goes out to the whole group, that'd be awesome. Let's see. Any other questions we missed or just things y'all want to talk about? You're also welcome to unmute and did any of that stuff we shared resonate? Oh, sorry, someone was going to talk.
No, I was just going to say, I was just trying to fix my typos in my notes and found that you said something about a listserv earlier, and I didn't really catch whatever that was part of.
Yeah, so in the springtime, the hope is in the springtime that we'll be releasing a listserv on our website. We did that in the past, in the way back past, about 10 years ago. They had a listserv that wasn't quite successful for the organization, but my hope is that it will take off and be a little bit more robust this time. I'll be monitoring it on the regular, and you all will be able to create the topics that you need, and I'm hoping it'll be more successful this time around, but the goal is to put it up on our website in the springtime.
Okay. I guess I'm not really following what a listserv is. It's remembering me back to Unix days and the really old days. So what is a listserv in a current vernacular?
Yeah, so basically a listserv is kind of like a chat board, or a bulletin board. So you have topics that are posted and people can respond to those topics as they see fit. It's not in real time. So it's not something like we're doing now where we can have a conversation face to face. It's more of a conversation offline, and people can respond to those questions whenever they want to. It's kind of like Reddit, if you're familiar with Reddit.
Right. I don't use Reddit, but as you were talking, I don't need any more emails. I can't keep up with all the newsletters that I get. I'm trying to unsubscribe so I can get on top of some of this.
Yeah, you
But
don't have to.
I am in several groups where they use a Discord group.
Yeah, yeah.
And like
So
I'm monitoring like now 7, or 10 rather. It used to be 6 groups on campus that I'm not officially affiliated with, but I got their little Discord QR code. And so they've got, other channels, and I can look at them when I have time.
yeah, I just
And
use
the
it
channels
broadly.
like Slack, parse it out into topics so that you know what to, you might want to look at, or,
Mhm. It's similar
up.
to that. We haven't decided on what platform we're going to use yet, so I use the word listserv broadly.
Got it.
Basically, it's just a forum for people to have discussions offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm in First Robotics, and I don't choose to look at the forums, but I think that they're kind of like Reddit. So I'm sure you guys have lots of people who can give you input, but
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, that platform thing, that is so challenging, like choosing the right platform, right? Because we all use different ones, and oh my goodness. So exciting. Good luck.
I can
All right.
also comment, I took a class through Discord during COVID, which I'll mention to several people, and they're like, what? How'd you do that? But what was interesting about it is, we had the normal, hashtag kind of channels within the group, but we would hold class virtually through Discord, and they would share their screen, and we could all comment in, to the side, as I recall, but you could unmute, you could bring your screen up. There are a lot of interfacing ways that you could do it. And then after we did our main lecture, where they're basically showing Google Slides, and they put the link to it in the chat, then we have the slides. Then we go to our work groups and do lab. And so a nice volunteer is our leader. And if we have problems with our programming, we unmute and say, yo, I'm really stuck. But we spend 2 hours together that way after the hour with the lecture. And it was a really interesting format. And I live 2 hours from where they are, and they're back to in person. So I liked how they did it. I probably wouldn't have been able to participate in the in-person version. But anyway, another version of Discord things, but I've thought about doing it where you instead of like Zoom breakout rooms.
Yeah.
It would be kind of like a more permanent place. You're going to just log into Discord on this group and go here, and we'll all collect, and then we'll go, you choose your breakout room sort of thing.
We're thinking about having the birds of a feather associated with it in some kind of way, or affinity groups.
Yeah, right. I've wanted to start some things like that, but not happening just yet. So maybe it'll go through this group and you guys do it, and I'll just participate.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a big experiment. We'll see. Jessica, I wanted to, since we did have a question around it, I was wondering if you could share some of the research or findings about the sectors. I don't know if that's readily available. If not, that's totally fine.
Yeah, no, we definitely can. I mean, so in this phase, and I'm gonna have to, sorry, I'm like clicking while I'm talking. We asked, one of the questions we asked in your annual survey this year was about, we set you up and we said, we want you to think about the organization you work within, university, museum, after school program, whatever that is, whatever space you're in. And then asked some questions about sort of what was especially easy or difficult in terms of the stuff you need to do to run a cafe. And I can maybe learn how to share my screen so you can see something here, because I think it is easier to see. So there's a lot on this page, and you don't need to take it all in. But in terms of, what your sector was in, that folks were in, and all of these different pieces of the puzzle when you're putting together a cafe program, had you rate sort of how challenging it was for your sector in general, like how hard is this for universities? And then what we're doing here is we're sort of showing how much different each sector was from the overall average of the group. And we had a small sample because we only had about like 28 active cafes responding. So take it with a grain of salt, but it was pointing us in some directions that we can look for more lines of inquiry as we go through in this year. And so you see places where it's sort of red, where it's hot, are areas that are a little bit more challenging for folks in after school. So a lot of those STEM professionals, right? And I think, Lauren, you made a comment in the chat to this effect of like, they have the kids, that part's not hard. They know how to run programs. What they struggle with is infusing the STEM content and getting STEM professionals, right? And then for an organization like, you know, a university, they had a like relatively few, but securing staff, like that was an area they're like, yeah, that's not such a big problem. Probably they have dedicated grant funds, right? They're just a bigger organization, or at least in the folks who are involved with our programs. And our like museum and zoo friends, yeah, we got venues. Venue is no problem, right? If you're at an institution like that has rooms and space and does programs, and we have access to STEM professionals right in our organization. So this was sort of pointing us in the direction of digging in more to the opportunities, the easy parts and the challenging parts for different sectors, so that maybe network-wide support can be a little more customized to the specific challenges of working within a school district or working within a museum or, you know, whatever kind of institution you're at. So we're going to be exploring more in this space later. Does that hit on what you were thinking, Kristen? Yes, thumbs up. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks. So we have a couple more minutes. I just wanted to make sure that folks were heard. Do you have any more questions? Do you have any like lingering desires? Is there anything cool you want to share or anything like that before we wrap up?
Something that came up for me as we were bringing on new team leaders for this year was like, I'm joining the STEAM advisory board. That's what we call our group. What other opportunities could I have in addition? Like, I'm, you know, here, can you help me network to other opportunities? And like for us at a university, we have some of those, but I'm kind of curious, and this will be much more of a birds of a feather. But I think that could be and I don't think this was a question you're asking, but like that could be like, what kind of like relationships and collaborations have then come as a result of having a teen science cafe? Because like I know for us, like we have a science festival as well, and so then the teens are super interested in volunteering with the science festival as well.
That is so great. Yeah, that's kind of like the next level. Like you're above and beyonding it here of like taking folks to the next level. And I mean, I'm just gonna ramble until someone wants to cut me off. I think Lauren, I don't know if you want to pipe up. I feel like you used to do this as well, or maybe still do. I remember hearing about it from you in the past of you really connected kids to other things.
I just put something in the chat. So I have teen science cafes for me started as like the focal point, and we realized how many kids were just craving science programming. So last year, my teen leaders, who I felt like the cafes kind of run themselves, I wanted them to have more leadership opportunities. So they now create and deliver a 2-hour science workshop to younger kids. So sort of a cafe that's led by the teens doing fun science activities to younger kids. So they're being teen science teachers. I also built off the science cafes. In the summer, we do Summer of Science. And so that's getting out of whether you're in an auditorium or a cafeteria or wherever you are. And so Summer of Science can be anything from a 1-hour workshop to a week-long real immersion in a topic, depending on who you get as volunteers. And then sometimes I don't have stuff that fits into the cafe model. Like we have access to go to the brain lab. Someone had mentioned brain science. And so I call those science sparks because it just doesn't fit the cafe model, but it's so I've just started building programming off. So the teen leaders kind of building out, how do you make those connections? I luckily, unfortunately, as COVID was the worst thing for the cafe network, it actually proved to be the best thing for my particular program because we went virtual, and I'm connected to a university. I'm the 4-H program, but we're connected to the University of Vermont. And the cafe program became really well known during COVID because we were doing virtual and everyone came out of the woodwork to do one. So now we get written into people's NSF grants. And so so we're, anytime someone comes to me, I just, if I can't give them a cafe, it's like, well, when are you free and what can you do? So never like, don't just say, oh, we can't accommodate you this year. And I have heard from some presenters that participants at cafes, the motivated kids will go up and talk to the presenter afterwards. And I've heard from several where, a participant then was working in a lab over the summer or during the school year as a high schooler, having that opportunity. So these are all things like you can recommend to your presenters, if they, beyond just being a mentor, like give out your email, step one, and how else could these kids connect further? But we in Vermont now have literally a whole pathway of different science programs that all started kind of because of the Science Cafe program.
Thank you for sharing that. It's always so exciting to hear. And I know that can feel like, I don't know if anyone on the call, Jill, you're new, like that's after many years, right? That doesn't have to be step one that you get there. We never want people to feel intimidated by that, but it's the potential that once you get going to see all those ways that it gels with your organization. It's really so fantastic.
Yeah, I'm affiliated with a emerging children's museum in STEAM in my small town. And we have tried to kind of break through that whole NSF thing several times over the years. And we've been trying to make the museum happen for about 7. So COVID was kind of, we had setbacks too, but that sounds great, Lauren. So if I get back to that, I'll find you and find out more about that. But that's not my first thing this week. So
yeah, I will say I don't write NSF grants. It's more just faculty on campus. They always have to put in that outreach component. And the fact that there's cafes, they now come to me with this sigh of relief. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do. Can I write this in and I'm like, yeah, sure. Because it's a win-win.
Right.
So I don't do
thought
anything.
that need is there, but we've had the community engagement phases of the university, and it's just, I'm really peripheral to all that specifically for me. So I don't know what's happened, but we've got a lot going on campus, and they're going to open something called the Innovation Center, like a big building this fall. So I'm hoping that some programs will be able to be hosted there.
Oh, Kristen, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm glad that we all got together today. Thank you so much for the robust conversation and the wonderful information from the surveys. And again, it only works if we have our Teen Science Cafe network members respond to these surveys so we can give you all this great info at the end of the year. I just want to thank Jessica and Angie again for sharing their insight with us. And again, this will be recorded and it'll be on our YouTube channel later. And all those resources that I was talking about, we are looking for a spring release, except for the form, which I will try to get to you. Well, I will get to you on Monday. I promise. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good rest of wherever you are, and we'll see you later.